Aircraft mechanics have a very important job. They keep the thousands of airplanes flying every day safe. But experts say there's a critical shortage of aviation maintenance technicians that can't keep up with growing demand.
It's already impacting the ability to grow. An aircraft is on the ground and I don't have a mechanic to fix it.
The fatal accident between an American Airlines regional jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter in Washington, D.C. has cast a light on how much pressure there is on an already strained industry where the slightest of variables determine safety.
This also seems to be very relevant at this point in time. Obviously, we also covered this crash to some extent, but I feel like there's been a lot of airline incidents recently. There was all the Boeing stuff in the last couple of years, the doors. There was obviously that crash that occurred. And so we've also recently had a plane that basically landed upside down or something like that. And so we're seeing a lot of things go wrong with airlines and airplanes in the last year or so. And I feel like this is getting extra attention. And obviously mechanics would be key here, since they're the ones who are going to make sure that these planes are operating as efficiently as possible. Obviously, maintenance isn't the cause of all of those issues that occurred, but I could see how having these systems healthy and up to date and well maintained is going to be top of mind for many of these individuals, especially if you've had a crash of some sort or you've had some mishap with your plane. You're going to be hyper focused in on making sure that there's no issues whatsoever, including things that could have been prevented through maintenance.
Boeing estimates that 716,000 technicians are needed worldwide to maintain the global air fleet over the next 20 years.
Demand from a Boeing or an Airbus for brand new aircraft, it's strong, and it'll be strong for years plural, and that is all driven by more people flying.
The current shortage of AMTs in the U.S. will reach roughly 25,000 workers by 2028. And as more...
That's actually great to know. If anyone's looking for a career, seems like this could be a good one. They haven't really covered how much they get paid, so that could be a determining factor for anyone, but since this is dedicated to mechanics for airplanes, presumably they would mention it.
More people and goods fly, the global air fleet is expected to grow, adding nearly 46,000 new aircraft between now and 2043.
A United Airlines Boeing 777 bound for Japan had a wheel fall off during takeoff.
2024 brought increased attention to aircraft maintenance, with airlines losing tires or pieces of planes mid-flight, and especially the near catastrophe with Alaska Airlines after Boeing didn't reinstall bolts that hold the door plug in place. The Federal Aviation Administration has also struggled with staffing shortages and funding in recent years. Jobs like air traffic controllers or maintenance carry a responsibility with them that one mistake could injure or kill hundreds of people.
These go on aircraft that fly millions of people every day. We're there to keep people safe.
Companies like GE Aerospace and aircraft maintenance schools are working to train the next generation of AMTs.
It feels like it's such an honor and a privilege to work on something like this, like a machine that flies.
CNBC visited GE in Lafayette, Indiana, and Aviation High School in Queens, New York, to explore the challenges facing the aviation industry and how it plans to keep up with the demand for mechanics and technicians. The U.S. aviation maintenance industry is a $65 billion business that employs roughly 329,000 people. The work done by an AMT can vary from overhauling an entire plane to specific sections or components. The majority of the workforce is in repair shops and parts manufacturing, and 23% work for airlines. A shortage of AMTs could slow down production or lead to delays, cancellations, even fewer flights. But these workers are also crucial to the global supply chain, military, and emergency services like aerial firefighting. The pandemic brought a sharp drop in air travel. At one point, over 16,000 commercial jets were grounded, and thousands of experienced technicians and machinists were laid off or retired.
People forget that the aerospace industry was in a pretty serious ramp at the time pre-COVID. And then, frankly, of course, overnight, we went from ramping to zero demand over time. And so we lost a lot of talent.
GE dominates the commercial engine space when combined with its joint venture with Safran CFM International. The CFM 56 is the best-selling jet engine in history. It powers more than 14,000 commercial and military aircraft, while its new LEAP engines power more than 3,500. The company said it's been able to hire back quickly, but that the aerospace supply chain still hasn't fully recovered. A single jet engine on a commercial aircraft can be made up of 40,000 components.
We need everything to be healthy, everyone be back up to full strength. So often it's our tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that are still in that process and may have some of that risk yet that they haven't seen flow through their workforce.
The number of new mechanic certificates rose 32% in 2023, but the overall number of certified mechanics has stayed near the same level over the past 20 years.
The blue-collar segment of our population has declined, and now aviation seeks and oftentimes needs the best, highest caliber technicians that can then be turned into certificated mechanics or repairmen.
The FAA has specialized certificates on who can perform and approve maintenance before a part or a plane is approved to fly.
The work of non-certificated people has to be supervised by certificated people, and certificated people have to approve for return to service.
If a maintenance issue does occur, certified individuals or the company could be fined. The process to get certified for these positions can take years depending on the specific job. GE said that a technician working at its Lafayette, Indiana facility makes an average of $80,000 to $90,000 a year in base pay.
When they walk through the front door, my training is not over. In fact, it goes on for years, in many cases at GE Aerospace and a lot of our peer companies before they're fully formed, fully functional, fully efficient.
Each facility can perform maintenance on what it's been approved for, which the FAA breaks down into different categories like airframe and power plant, which refer to aircraft and engines. They are also known as A&P licenses.
That's your license to learn. You don't know anything about a 737 or an Airbus or a 777 when you get your A&P license.
American Airlines has the world's largest commercial aircraft maintenance facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So when we bring them in, we certainly put them through a lot of training over the course of their first few years, and then that training continues through the rest of their career.
Commercial airlines have to complete a continued airworthiness maintenance program to ensure aircraft are airworthy and safe for passengers throughout an aircraft's life.
Line maintenance manages the active airplanes that we're flying revenue passengers for every day. When you look at base maintenance, we're behind the scenes. We take the heavier work, and no different than changing the oil in your car or rotating the tires, we have similar tasks that we have to do. But instead of just a handful on your car, we have thousands. And those thousands of tasks are accomplished over the course of the life of the aircraft. And so over the course of 20 years, you may see a heavy maintenance event 4, 5, even 6 times.
Big airlines like American and aerospace manufacturers like Airbus, Boeing, and GE have had apprentices.
I'm curious what background folks need to have in order to enter this field. I feel like they might have been mentioning it. They've been referencing like aerospace. I assume that's like a standard aerospace engineering degree is what they're referencing. And then they're also referencing the certification that exists for folks who can do maintenance. So it's unclear if these are the same individuals in these fields where you need to get like a bachelor's of aerospace engineering and then you get a certification to actually prove that you're sort of ready for prime time for maintenance for one of these systems that could be very large and potentially dangerous for other individuals, or if there's other backgrounds that folks can have and they just need the certification. So maybe they'll cover that as well. I'm not too familiar with this field myself.
This programs for decades to recruit new talent.
You know, I was just kind of looking for that next thing, next challenge, you know, for myself. And it's like, well, automotive stuff's cool, but like, you know, working on jet engines, you know, that's, you know, pretty awesome too.
Crystal go deep.
Yeah, so this individual seems like they were maybe like an automotive or something like that, and then they maybe went through certification and training to kind of specialize in engines for airplanes. So again, this is where I feel like they haven't really clarified it, but maybe they're about to mention it right here with this individual.
Inez is part of the first graduating class from GE Aerospace's newest apprentice program in Lafayette, Indiana. At this facility, the company assembles and repairs LEAP-1A and LEAP-1B engines that are used on the Airbus A320neo and Boeing 737 MAX planes.
Working on aircraft engines, like turbine engines, is definitely different than working on automotive. You know, you're working with a lot of parts, a lot of bigger things.
Commercial aviation is a long-cycle business and requires making a lot of decisions years in advance, including hiring.
It is not a spigot where you just turn on the tap and you have a ready now fully functional aerospace employee that's going to work in a factory.
Airlines and manufacturers also partner with technical schools to ensure it will have enough AMTs in the future.
Boeing started coming to us after the pandemic. As the pandemic was kind of winding down, there's an increasing demand for more programs like this.
Aviation High School in Queens, New York has been teaching airplane maintenance to students for 89 years.
We get 4,000 applicants for 500 seats across the 5 boroughs, where they spend multiple periods a day working in their aviation maintenance classroom alongside aviation maintenance teachers who are FAA certified. They've worked in the airlines, they have the experience, and the great majority of those teachers graduated from the school.
Seeing all the engines that they work on, it was really cool. Because I never thought that a school like this existed in New York City.
I'm gonna start working with the airline as I go to college to get my associate's degree in aviation maintenance, and then I'm gonna transfer to a more bigger college to get my engineering degree.
I actually want to end up as a pilot when I'm older, and I'm using this as a stepping stone because mechanics, they make a decent amount of money, especially when you're fresh out of high school, and I feel like I could use that to pay for my flight training and also already have an in.
Historically, after a program like ours, typically you go to the regional airlines first. Lately, because of the huge technician need, there's been more students going directly into American, Delta, United.
Still, the industry faces challenges with hiring. While working for an airline may be the most visible version of these jobs, they only employ 23% of the AMTs in the U.S.
Aerospace is just a fascinating industry that is only a small portion driven by airlines.
Experts say that a retirement wave is coming to the industry. The average age of a certified mechanic in the U.S. is 54, and 40% are over the age of 60. Only 2.8% are women.
I tried to warn people about this 30 years ago. If it takes me 10 minutes to inspect an inexperienced worker's work, and it takes me 3 minutes to inspect an experienced worker's work, it becomes exponential as you go down the line.
In 2024, GE hired 1,900 new engineers and manufacturing workers, but small companies are having a harder time recruiting.
80% of the maintenance facilities we represent are small businesses. They're doing it the same way they've always done it, by word of mouth, etc. A couple are very, very active in local schools.
It's changing. More and more states are looking to do aviation maintenance as a high school, or at least a hybrid high school college program.
But hiring isn't the only issue affecting the aerospace supply chain.
The biggest challenge we're having right now is getting new parts, engines. Training materials for us means like teardown engines or systems that are taken from other aircraft and put onto a board so we can teach students, troubleshoot the faults and so on, and that's been hard to get because there's a shortage of supplies.
While the labor force has faced shortages post-pandemic, it's also dealing with shifting trends. In 2022, a survey of unemployed people in the U.S. showed nearly half wouldn't take a job.
Wow. This is a little out of date. So this is from 2022 is what they're sourcing here. And that is a pretty high percentage. This definitely makes sense. If you could choose not to work in a location, especially one where effectively you can't do your job at all unless you're physically there any day of the week, that's certainly less appealing than something you could do remotely, even though there has been quite a bit of back and forth on hybrid versus in office versus at home work in other jobs that are not necessarily required to be there for any technical reasons. And so those definitely have some flexibility baked in. If you have to be doing maintenance on an airplane, you can't just call in from work that day likely. You'd probably have to physically go in person. And so I can understand the hassle that that brings. 49% does seem high, especially if you're unemployed. I would assume that these numbers shifted, especially as people were longer and longer out of work.
Job that didn't offer remote work, a benefit not likely for someone who needs to physically fix an aircraft.
The entire world is going to feel this workforce shortage. You already can't get your houses built. I think that aerospace can actually lead the recovery of that, because we do need and want and can train and have trained the elite when it comes to these blue-collar work jobs that are available.
More workers have also been pursuing tech jobs over blue collar.
I talked to a lot of people in the industry for 30 years that their damn children can't change a tire. For our folks in the repair station environment, the only barrier to entry is you having technical skills, knowing a screwdriver from a wrench, and the desire to learn, period.
That is a pretty low barrier to entry. So as they covered, some people are even able to graduate from high school and then start to do apprenticeships here. Sounds like you're more likely to do that if you're in a specialized program. And so it does seem like it's a fairly low barrier to entry. And so this certainly seems like a good option if you're going to enter into a blue collar job. It seems like there's a good amount of demand and that demand is going to increase. So likely that means higher pay, more job security in the coming years.
Often what we see is people have a very dated view of what it might have looked like in the 1970s. I'd like to believe it's night and day, just in the physical condition, the work that's being done, the amount of automation and technology. Of course, having competitive compensation helps, but a lot of the investment in training that we've made in our workforce and providing more of a career path is a key part of our retention.
The next generation of mechanics will also need to know about new technologies that are entering the space.
It is getting into the high schools and showing that a career in aerospace as an engineer, or frankly, on a production floor, is not your grandparents' manufacturing. You're dealing with the latest technologies. You're talking about laser-guided machine precision.
The demand on the air transport system will continue to grow as more people and goods will travel by air into the future. But the question remains on whether the already strained industry will be able to fill the jobs it needs to keep up with demand.
Every segment of our white-collar world depends on blue-collar workers. We have to recognize that those ranks will have to be filled by one of two things: either more numbers or technology. The airlines and the big boys are going to be able to automate things. They're going to have to invest in that type of infrastructure to be able to make the remaining technicians more efficient and effective, or they'll have aircraft on the ground.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.